Okay, Ben, I don't know still. Okay. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Oh, no, it's not on. Here, wait a minute. I can see now. I got it.
You got it.
Good morning, everyone. Everybody hear me? Okay, great. I think there's just a couple stragglers out in the hallway here. We'll wait for them to come in and then we'll get started. Ladies, there's water available today, bottled water if anybody would like one before we get started. It's right up here on a table. I knew you would. I should have passed them around next time. Thank you, B. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming, both here and virtually. Have everybody had an enjoyable Thanksgiving as much as possible this year and the times we're in, even if we got to see our family online? I hope you all had an enjoyable day and lots of turkey. We'll get started with the business meeting. Elaine Hill, our secretary, has posted the minutes on the door as usual. And if we could just have one hand to raise to approve the minutes as posted. Oh, great. Okay. Minutes are approved. Thank you very much, Elaine. And Kathy, our treasurer, want to just stand and give the report? 160? 160. Okay, great. Carol Henry is our communication and membership person, and she's just feeling a little out of sorts this morning, so she decided to be safe and to stay home. But I really wanted to thank her. She does a wonderful, wonderful job of getting all the communications out to the entire membership, both virtually and to teach everybody how to do it online, which is great. Our charities this year are all, of course, in dire need, as well as every other charity in the world, I'm sure. So we are going to have our book sale for sure. And Kathy Rushak, is she here? Oh, I'll go get her. I'm sorry. She wanted to talk, so okay. Thanks. So everybody knows our charities, right? It's Grace Place, Naples Park Elementary School, and Literary Volunteers of Collier County. Those are our three charities. We've been giving money to them for many, many years. They're all wonderful. Everybody on the board and most people here know the charities. So the book sale is going to be a book stroll. So it'll be in people's garages along Winding Oaks Way. I'm going to let Kathy tell you a little more about it. I think she's coming. You see her? She's got a big hat on.
Well, I'm here to invite you to a stroll, our book stroll, which will take the place of our book sale. And to keep us safe, we're going to be in 4 garages rather than 1 fitness center. And so we're starting the signups, but I want you to know the garages are going to be, it's February 19th, 3rd Friday in February. It's going to be in our garage. Kitty corner to us is Fleming's. Kitty corner to them is Aronski's. And then 2 down is Dodson's. So there'll be a row of houses. And we'll need a lot of volunteers because we need people to set up, and we'll be divided into groups. So if anybody has a group that they want to have 5 of them come and pick 1 garage and work together, you can do that, or you can sign up individually. We'll have 3 time sets on Friday. And so we're going to have 3 people per garage on Friday per setup. So if you 3 of you want to sign up for a particular time, we can do it that way. So prices are the same. And I want you to think about saving your books. Our space may be a little shorter, so some of the older nonfiction that you think people may not really want to buy here, you might not put in the book sale, but they will still go to the club. So you do not take them to the fitness center at all, but during the week beforehand, you can take them to the club up until noon of Thursday, the 18th. And then the club is going to bring tables to all the garages, and they're going to bring books to all the garages. So they'll divide them up so that they're equal. So that's a little switch. Don't take them to the fitness center. Okay, any questions? Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Kathy. So she doesn't want any encyclopedias either, girls. Don't bring any of those. I'm sorry. Cookbooks. I don't think so. I don't think that most people get all their recipes, I'm told, online these days. I still use a cookbook when I cook, but I'm told that most people use recipes online and don't use cookbooks anymore. And the author's luncheon, we're going to get into that at a later time, but we do have an author, of course, and she's willing to do it virtually if we're still in the times that we're in, which I'm sure we will be. I think that's all for today for the meeting. Oh, I want to tell you, Robin Pavia is not here today. Her husband, Tony, had hip replacement surgery, and they went back to Connecticut to have it done. And I haven't talked to her, but I emailed her, and he's doing well. He's supposed to come home today. So good luck to Tony. He was great last month. Doc Graziano, our past president, is going to introduce today's speaker. That's a treat. So Dot, where are you? Okay.
Well, she's coming up. I just want to add, bring your favorite mask, your gloves, and your bag to the fair.
You'll have all this information a dozen times before the book sale, I'm sure, girls. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Dot.
Thank you, Mary. I just want you to know that Maureen and I go back a long way. Maureen is the reason that I was the president of the book club. She sucked me right in because she loves all of this. But anyway, we're still friends, so that's good. Maureen was born and raised in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so that makes her a Yooper. Okay, got it right. She graduated from Michigan State University with a degree in education, and that's where she met her husband, Rick Janelle. They lived most of their married life in Upper Arlington, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus. She was a preschool director and a teacher for 10 years, and upon retiring, became a docent for the Columbus Museum of Art. In 2003, she and Rick bought a home on Pondside Lane. She has 2 sons, 2 daughters-in-law, 3 grandsons, 2 granddaughters, and a dog named Coco Janelle. The Book of Longings is Maureen's 8th presentation for this book club. The first one that she did was Water for Elephants, if you might remember that one, and it's still one of her favorites. She loves this book club. And as I've said, she's a past president and a very, very popular presenter. So I'd like now to present my dear friend, Maureen Junell.
Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here. And before I start, I want to thank Mary Cronin and every member of the book club board because you've made book club happen. And it's a very challenging time for all of us, but I appreciate all your efforts so that we can continue to enjoy book club, whether it's here or online. I have so many papers, so I'm going to get myself organized before I start. During COVID-19, books have become very important to me and to many others. One of my favorite sayings is, the best place to be is between the pages of a book. And during COVID, I spent many hours between the pages of a book. I eagerly anticipated the publication of a book by an author I enjoyed, almost as if I awaited a visit from an old friend. Every Sunday, I read the New York Times book review section and the Naples News. And beginning in June, I put on my mask and visited Barnes & Noble about twice a month. There I would treat myself to one or two bestsellers. I would read them and pass them on and pass them around. But in February, I will be bringing a big bag of 2020 bestsellers to the Stonebridge Book Club sale. But the book I most eagerly awaited was a new book by Sue Monk Kidd. Such a beautiful cover, isn't it? Because I knew what it was about. Sue Monk Kidd is no stranger to the Stonebridge Book Club. She was the guest author at the 2012 Authors Luncheon and visited again when I presented her book, The Invention of Wings. But it is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about her again. Sue was raised in the small town of Sylvester, Georgia. She knew early on that she wanted to be a writer, but followed a more traditional role and graduated from Texas Christian University with a degree in nursing. During her 20s, she worked as a registered nurse and college nursing instructor, and during that time met and married her husband, Sandy Kidd, and together they have 2 children and now several grandchildren. Just before her 30th birthday, she turned again toward a writing career and enrolled in writing classes. Her goal was to write fiction, but she began writing nonfiction, inspirational pieces. Her book, When the Heart Waits, was published. There she is. I forgot about that. You know, when she first visited us, she had beautiful black hair. And 3 years later, she came back and it was beautiful white hair. And it's just charming. And she's a beautiful lady. When you want to put all the books up, we'll take a look at those. Okay. I don't have many slides because I don't have many pictures from the 1st century in Galilee. These are the books that Sue has written, and I wanted to show this picture because I think it's interesting. In her 30-some years of writing, she has only written 8 books. She does so much research on her books that she doesn't put one out every year. So they're much anticipated by many. So as I started to say, before her 30th birthday, she started writing again. Her goal was to write fiction, but she began writing nonfiction inspirational pieces. Her book, When the Heart Waits, was published in 1990 and has become a touchstone on contemplative spirituality. In 1996, The Dance of the Dissident Daughter, describing kids' journey into feminist theology, is a memoir that has had a groundbreaking effect within religious circles. In her 40s, Sue turned her attention to writing fiction. When her first novel, The Secret Life of Bees, was published in 2012, it became a genuine literary phenomenon, spending more than 2.5 years on the bestseller list. It has been translated into 36 languages and sold more than 8 million copies worldwide. For over a decade, the novel was produced on stage by the American Place Theater, and in 2008, it was adapted into a movie, and it won the People's Choice Award for Best Movie and the NAACP Image Award for Best Picture. In 2019, an off-Broadway production of the Atlantic Theater won the Adelco Award for Best Musical. The novel is taught widely in middle school, high school, and college classrooms. Set in 1964 in South Carolina, the year the Voting Rights Act was passed, Sue writes of the racial cruelties Black people faced and their determination to vote. Her second novel, The Mermaid Chair, has sold well over 1 million copies since its publication in 2005, reaching #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and remaining on the hardcover and paperback for 9 months. After traveling with her daughter, Ann Kidd Taylor, to sacred sites in Greece, Turkey, and France, they co-authored a memoir, Traveling with Pomegranates, a mother-daughter story that was published in 2009. The Invention of Wings, her third novel, was published in 2014 to wide public acclaim. It debuted #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, where it spent a total of 9 months. It has sold over 1 million copies, won many literary awards, and was chosen for Oprah's Book Club 2.0. Sue's much anticipated novel, The Book of Longings, was published on April 21st, 2020. Sue and her husband moved from Florida to North Carolina after Hurricane Irma and live right next door to their daughter Anne and her family. As members of the Stonebridge Book Club, we all know that such good things happen when we read books. We visit new places, learn new things, and we can be uplifted and moved by the writer's words. For me, one of the best things that happened because of our book club is my friendship with Sue Monk Kidd. I want to spend just a minute telling you how this happened. In 2012, I went to Barnes & Noble to hear Sue and her daughter talk about their memoir, Traveling with Pomegranates. During their presentation, they offhandedly mentioned that they had recently moved to Marco Island. The wheels in my head started turning, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have Sue, now a local author, be our guest author? So I wrote a proposal to submit to her lecture agent and push send. Almost immediately, I had a reply that Sue Monk Kidd would be pleased to be our guest author. And so a lovely friendship began. We share a love of books, interest in current events, and both our husbands, were treated at the Moffitt Comprehensive Cancer Center in Tampa. When The Invention of Wings was published, I thought it would be a wonderful book to present at the Stonebridge Book Club. I mentioned it to the then board that wouldn't it be fun to have an author attend our meeting when their book was presented, and they agreed. So I sent an email to Sue and invited her to be our guest, and she said she would be delighted to come. She offered to do a question and answer with our members, which I eagerly accepted. At the time of her visit, Sue mentioned that she was working on her next novel, but does not reveal anything until the book has a name, a title. Here's a little name dropping. In 2016, Rick and I were having dinner with Sue and Sandy, and I asked about her new book, and she said, I can tell you about it now. It has a name. The book will be called The Book of Longings, and it is the story of Anna, the wife of Jesus. And I remember thinking, oh, that could be controversial. And I wasn't the only one who has thought that. The Book of Longings in the May 17th edition of the New York Times Review, editor Elizabeth Egan wrote, and I quote, "Jesus, Mary, and Anna? Writing a novel about Jesus' wife takes chutzpah, which Sue Monk Kidd seems to have. The veteran author has tackled big subjects before, including faith, slavery, mother-daughter relationships, and an affair between a married woman and a monk. But in her fourth novel, now in its second week on the hardcover fiction list, Kidd goes where few writers have ventured before, telling the story of Anna, a first-century woman who falls in love with an 18-year-old Jesus," unquote. The novel imagines Jesus as a young carpenter, not yet fully aware of his godly status, but pious and full of spiritual and benevolent traits that will come to define his ministry. But the story belongs to Anna. The idea to write a novel about the fictional wife of Jesus came to the author in 2014. She was sitting at her desk reading an article in National Geographic about a fragment of an ancient manuscript that had been brought to the world's attention by a Harvard professor, named The Gospel of Jesus' Wife. The manuscript suggests that Jesus was married and speaks of "my wife." The fragment is now judged by most scholars to be a masterful forgery. It turned out to be a fraud. But the author's imagination was ignited. She thought, if Jesus' wife ever existed, she would be the most silenced woman in Western history. So for the next 4.5 years, she got up every day and tried to give her a name and a voice. For the first 14 months, the author did an exhaustive amount of research, a process she describes as both tedious and wondrous. She watched documentaries, video lectures, and immersed herself in books on Jesus and Palestine, and read about Jewish women philosophers in Alexandria. Her research is meticulous, and the period details I found fascinating. The story is set in Galilee and begins in Sepphoris. I had to Google to find out how to pronounce these names, and I may not be doing them quite right. But anyway, it is set in Sepphoris in 1617 CE. At that time, the area had been occupied by the Romans for 77 years. The Jewish people were treated harshly, taxed heavily, and there was a growing resentment. The world of ancient Palestine was a class system of caste, male supremacy, and a society with a distinct hierarchy. At the top was the ruler, who served at the pleasure of Rome. Below him spread a thin layer of aristocracy, which at that time included noblemen, as well as men who owed their wealth and status to the patronage of King Herod and his sons. Another form of aristocracy were the priests attached to the temple. At that time, the high priest was appointed by the Romans, so many Jews believed him to be doing the Roman magistrate's bidding. After the aristocracy came the professional class, and this is the group that Anna's family would have been part of. They were literate, educated laymen who held positions in the local administration. Finally came the peasants and day workers, the unemployed and disabled, who together made up the bulk of Galilee's population, by some estimates as much as 90%. And Jesus would have been in that category. This was the society in which the story of Anna unfolds. When I received my book and opened it and read the first words, "I am Anna. I was the wife of Jesus ben Joseph of Nazareth," it took my breath away. But again, this is not the story of Jesus. This is the story of Anna. We meet Anna in the 14th year of her life, and she is the vehicle through which we experience the story and meet the many fascinating characters in the book. She lives with her upper-class family in Sepphoris in the central Galilee region. Her father, Matthias, was the head scribe and counselor to the tetrarch, Herod Antipas. Anna's passion is writing, a passion denied most girls, but which she is secretly able to pursue thanks to her father's one kindness to her. He allows her to have inks and paper. She begins to put down her feelings and was drawn to telling stories of biblical women. Anna is exceptionally bright, daring, ambitious, and a gifted writer. She longed to become a scribe, have a voice, and be a voice for others, particularly the neglected, silenced, and forgotten women around her. She wants to bring forth the largeness in herself. She wants the freedom to be a voice and to leave her voice in the world. She says, and I quote from the book, "To be ignored, to be forgotten, that was the worst sadness of all." Her mother, Hagar, only wants to marry Anna off to a wealthy man and be rid of her. Her beloved aunt, Yalfa, sister to Matthias, is sent to live with the family. She is educated, fierce, wise, and is Anna's lifeline. She encourages Anna's longings and gives her an incantation bowl in which to write her prayer and secret longings. And these bowls really did exist in the first century. Another thing I Googled. So she longs to continue her education. Her family expects her to marry an older, bitter widower, a prospect that horrifies her. In the marketplace where Anna is to meet the rich, miserable man, Nathaniel, to whom her parents plan to betroth her, she encounters by chance a charismatic and kindly carpenter, an 18-year-old Jesus. After the betrothal contract has been signed, but before the marriage, Nathaniel dies. But Anna is considered a widow and her marriageable status diminished. When she refuses Herod's offer to be her concubine, she flees and is rescued by Jesus from an angry mob in the marketplace. Indeed, his marriage proposal to Anna consists of standing between her and the angry mob who are stoning her. Anna and Jesus bond over their status as outcasts. She as a widow, and he as a child of dubious parentage. Jesus said, and I quote, "I am called a mamzer." In Jewish religious law, a mamzer is a person born from a certain forbidden relationship. Her father allows them to be married, and she becomes part of his household in Nazareth with his dear mother, Mary, and his brothers, James, Simon, and their families. Her beloved aunt, Yalfa, is allowed to accompany her. The author writes of Anna and Jesus' life in Nazareth and the tender details of their marriage. The Book of Longings is a love story, and the author imagines, I use the word imagine always, the couple's mutually supportive partnership, even as Jesus' call to ministry grows stronger. The author says she shaped the character of Jesus from a multitude of sources, many of them that are familiar to all of us. Her consideration of his mother, his selfishness when it came to helping others and advocating for them, his role as oldest son and peacemaker within his family, his kindness and his devotion to his faith. But it was Jesus, the husband, that offered the most insight to him as a person. His love for Anna was second only to his love for God. He understood her need to write because it mirrored his need to minister. He was also a progressive husband, accepting Anna's use of contraceptive. Who knew about black seed oil? Because he loved her and accepted what she felt deep inside about motherhood and her own self. Yet there was a very human side depicted in the novel that demonstrated frustration and anger when he called the temple the den of thieves. After being baptized by John the Immerser, or John the Baptist, he leaves his wife to begin his ministry. Because, as I said earlier, his love for Anna was second only to his love for God. And he begins to understand and accept his God-given role. The Book of Longings is historical fiction, but the author's research is impeccable and thorough. The novel is beautifully written, and as you read, you become immersed in the first century. I was raised as a Catholic and had 8 years of a Catholic education, but I have always felt that Catholics in general are not students of the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. But I have learned so much from this book, and it stretched me to learn more and to listen better. I have many friends who are in Bible study groups, but I was never interested. But now I am. But back to Anna. The book is about the way women have been silenced throughout history. The author offers countless examples of this in action, from Anna having the scrolls of her own writing burnt by her mother, to her friend Tabitha having her tongue cut out by her father as a punishment for publicly accusing a Roman soldier of raping her. The focus of Anna's writing is pulled from scripture, but she also writes about Tabitha, her Aunt Yelta. These are imaginary people in the book. This one is, and it's Thessalius, the first wife of Herod, and many others she knows have been wronged and then silenced. The passion Jesus has for his own calling gives Anna the ability to embrace her own calling. When she is exiled to Alexandria, she discovers a very different view towards women, an acceptance of them as forward-thinking individuals. And when I read that, I thought, of course, Cleopatra had ruled 66 years before Jesus was born, a woman ruling. When she went to Alexandria, she saw women with uncovered heads, girls walking behind their tutors with wooden tablets hitched to their waist, and pictures of the winged goddess Isis everywhere. But Jesus must stay in Galilee because his time has come to take up his ministry. And so their separation begins. After disobeying her uncle, Anna and her aunt seek asylum in Therapeutae, a community in Egypt, which did exist in the first century, dedicated to quiet, contemplative life, simplicity, and study, and she is able to write freely. Because she has seen the two extremes, Galilee and Egypt, she knows she must preserve her writing because there will come a time when she might again be silenced. There have been times throughout history when women have enjoyed freedoms and access to education, culture, and society, only to see it revoked through a change in politics or religion. What came to mind to me is that most recently the Taliban in Afghanistan. Before 1996, women were educated, dressed in Western clothing, and moved about freely. When the Taliban took power, women were forced to wear a burqa, not leave their home without a male member of the family, and schooling for women ended at the age of 8. In the Book of Longings, Judas, the betrayer of Jesus, is Anna's much beloved brother. One of the biggest questions in the Christian story is why Judas betrayed Jesus. The author wanted to give him a reason for his betrayal. In her imagined version, Judas is Anna's adopted brother who was orphaned when his father was crucified and his mother sold into slavery after a failed Jewish revolt against the Romans, a historically real insurrection in 4 BCE. Jesus and Judas were united in a wish for the Romans to be gone from their lands, but at odds in the way to achieve this. Both were radicals, but one violent, while the other was nonviolent. Judas' betrayal was the force that brought Anna out of exile and back to Galilee. Yeltha tells Anna, Judas means to have his revolution, and the surest way to incite the masses is for the Romans to execute their Messiah. Anna arrives to see Jesus carrying his cross and witness the crucifixion. Even though we know how this will end, the author's beautiful description was very emotional for me to read. Anna says, and I quote from the book, "In these last minutes, what did he most want to hear? That he had been seen and heard in this world? That he accomplished what he had set out to do? That he loved and had been loved? Your goodness will not be forgotten," I told him. "Not a single act of your love will be squandered. You've brought God's kingdom as you hoped. You've planted it in our hearts," unquote. After the death of Jesus, Anna knows she will not remain in Nazareth, as much as she loves Jesus's mother. She says, "Nazareth had never been my home. Jesus had been my home." Now with him gone, her home was on a hillside in Egypt, and she returns to Therapeuta. And I just added this morning because often in Sue's books, she writes of the power of female community. And there she finds contentment with her family, Yulfa, Yulfa's daughter, and Tabitha. She is studying and writing. Years later, she buries her writings on a hillside to preserve them so that one day they can be found again. She also buries her incantation bowl on which she had written many years ago as a girl of 14, "When I am dust, sing these words over my bones. She was a voice." I now would like to address the elephant in the room, as I call it, a married Jesus. So I wrote Sue and asked her to share her thoughts on what inspired her and how having a married Jesus might have changed the world. She kindly sent me information that might be helpful in responding to my questions. And she also wrote, and I quote, "I hope you will convey my best and warmest greetings to the group. I have so enjoyed visiting with all of you in the past." My question, which many others have asked, the idea of a married Jesus goes against everything we have been taught. How did you approach the character of Jesus? And I quote, "I didn't take on writing about a married Jesus lightly. I knew that for readers, imagining a married Jesus could mean digging through some internal resistance, the fear perhaps of stepping out of a sanctioned beliefs or questioning religious authority. Jesus is revered by millions across the world. As my husband said when I announced the premise to him, 'You're going to write a novel in which Jesus gets married? What could possibly go wrong?' And as an aside, I might add that Sandy is a retired Methodist minister. Of course, I don't know if Jesus was married," she continues, "but believing it wasn't the point. Imagining it was. Reimagining the past might allow us to re-envision the present. My primary approach in fashioning the character of Jesus was to portray him as a fully human. I wanted to depict what the late historical Jesus scholar Marcus Borg called the pre-Easter Jesus. It has long been a doctrine of the church that Jesus is both fully human and fully divine. But over the centuries, his humanity diminished as people accentuated his divinity. Writing from a novelist perspective and not a religious one, I was primarily interested in his humanity and what an extraordinary human being he was. I depicted him as a rabbi, social prophet, Messiah, and nonviolent resistor, whose dominant message was love, compassion, inclusion, and the coming of God's kingdom within the hearts and minds of people. Someone who read the novel told me it had stirred a new appreciation in her for Jesus and his teaching, and I was touched by that. How would the world have differed if Jesus had a wife, I asked. This is Sue's reply. As I set my imagination free to imagine Jesus not as a bachelor, but as a husband, it occurred to me that if he had been married, history would have likely evolved differently. There are only speculative answers, but it seems likely that Christianity and the Western world would have had a somewhat different religious and cultural inheritance. If Jesus had a wife, a genuine partner who had her own story, perhaps women and their stories would have found more inclusion and importance. Perhaps our relationship with sacredness and sexuality would have been less polarized. Sex might not have been viewed quite as sinful, and it's a fair bet that celibacy within the priesthood would not exist, unquote. Sue Monk Kidd writes that she hopes the readers find the novel enlightening and learn something from it. I certainly did. I don't think I have ever written a more difficult review, and that I Googled more things, and my dining room table was covered. I wrote a notebook full of thoughts, and it was just in a time that was not known to me as much as it should have been. I learned something from it, and I hope you did too. But she most wants the reader to have an empathetic experience with the characters, to feel what it's like, for instance, to be silenced, marginalized, and left behind, and what it's like to live into our largeness, to follow our longings, to find our bravery. Even though the Book of Longings is set in the 1st century, it was one of the most modern books I have read this year. And I saw parallels between 1st century Galilee and our 21st century world. I hope you will join the conversation with me and tell me what you thought of the Book of Longings. I put out a list of some questions that Carol included. And first of all, I would like to know what anyone would like to share with us about the book and how they felt about the book, reading it. I would love to hear your thoughts as well before we get into any questions. How do we do this?
Maureen, I'll try to just speak. I felt the same way you did. I had 12 years of Catholic education, and there was a Bible in our house, and it sat on the shelf, never opened. So I knew nothing. So this was, as you said, very enlightening. Really well done, of course. I don't know, however, how many other people feel the same way about, their upbringing. So maybe they could start. And there's a microphone right here. I don't think it's on then, right?
Yeah, can you turn it on?
If anything would like to come up.
Is anyone, Elsie?
I'm sorry, the folks down the line aren't gonna be able to hear unless you go to the mic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have to go to the mic because they can't hear you online. It's on, Elsie, it's right there.
When I opened the book up and started reading, I thought, do I really want to read this book? I mean, it's so foreign for me. I grew up in Venezuela. I was Catholic and Protestant. Protestant because my dad had to be Protestant. He was really Jewish, but he had to be Protestant because living in Venezuela, you were not allowed to be Jewish and work for no outcome. So I was both. I went to Catholic and never knew I was Jewish till the age of 18. So when I opened this book, I thought, do I really want to read it? I found it fascinating. I thought it was I couldn't put it down. It was so interesting. It was done so well. I just thought it was amazing. So that's it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a thought about the book? Well, then I would like to ask you, I've sort of changed my questions. Do you see any parallels in women today to the first century? For example, and I can't find my questions here, they're here. Can you think of a woman in contemporary world who has used her voice to make a difference? I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Are you thinking the same? Her writings and her, before she was on the Supreme Court, the cases she took that have, women couldn't open a charge account before that case. Would you like to add anything else on her? Because I can't find my notes in here. Yeah.
We're also thankful that she did what she did in the past. So, yeah, someone, that's what this Anna is like, someone who has a voice to, I don't know, to support women.
There was a largeness in her, wasn't there? Can anyone else think of another person?
This is Janelle. Online are asking if you could restate the comments for the question.
Okay, okay. Okay.
It's on, is it working? Okay. I have to say, I identified with this young lady. My history is that I was a nurse, and then this nurse practitioner program came out, and you could do so many more things and work many more places or on your own. So I did that, and I got my master's. And then I looked at how pediatrics were being handled in those days, those old days. And pediatrics was my forte. And I decided, well, there are a lot of things I would like to do differently, and that included primarily spending more time with the families who brought their children in and teaching more and helping them to be responsible for their babies and children and their family. So there was nobody else that was doing that. I didn't have, in Connecticut at that time, I didn't have a role model. But I had some women friends who were strong and did things in their field or whatever without asking permission, and they successful. So I just wanted to all do that. So fortunately, I had some pediatrician friends, colleagues who supported me, which was unusual in the 70s. And I worked for a while with one of the pediatricians, and I thought, well, I would like to do this on my own. So I spoke to one of them, who were all men, of course, and they said, well, I'll be your backup, but I'm not going to provide you with an office or equipment. So that's what I did. I found a place that I could have a little office. I met a woman who was an RN who was happy to work with me. And I did have a couple of physicians that would support me in making diagnoses in those days, writing prescriptions. They didn't let nurse practitioners write prescriptions in the earlier days. So all of this started from nothing and just grew until I did have my own practice, and I hired physicians in 2 different hospitals to get me privileges to go in there and see babies in the nursery and work with families. So I really liked this book because it sort of was reminiscent for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, bravo to you for doing that. Is there any, I found my notes, lucky you. Some of the other women,
And I was just, from the beginning, impressed with the relationship between Anna and her beloved aunt, and how strong her aunt was. What we found out, she had.
Yeah.
But that drew the contrast for me of how the community of women support each other, and she recognized in Anna all of those attributes and stuck with her all those years to bring Anna then to, what was it? Therapeutic?
The word therapy, I think, comes from, yes, I Googled.
And that community, but there were still also, along with Jesus, other wonderful men that came through Anna's life. So I just had to salute that part.
Yes.
too.
And many men's voices have been silenced. You couldn't have lived through 2020 without seeing the marches of Black Lives Matter, men and women's voices wanting to be heard, saying this must end. And so there are still times when voices are silenced. Another thing I thought of, and it's sort of not one you might think of as a woman with a largeness and a voice, well, certainly a voice, was Dolly Parton. Now, Dolly Parton came from a family of great poverty. You know, they didn't have anything much at all. But she had a voice, a beautiful voice. And not only did she lend her voice for us to enjoy, but she is so generous with her. Just this summer, she gave, or maybe it was spring, $1 million to Vanderbilt in her home state of Tennessee, Vanderbilt University, to begin to help to find a vaccine. And so she continues to lend her voice to things that she thinks are important. And there are many women, and certainly times are much better than there's no comparison. But over the years, women's voices have been silenced. And not that long ago, a movement called Me Too, of women who stood up and said, me too. I was abused by men. Bill Cosby's still in jail. So now it has, these voices are coming up and supporting each other, other women. And so we must continue to raise our voices. Now, I can't be Dolly Parton or Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Most of us can't, but we can support the good work that people start and continue right in our own community, the neighborhood clinic. I have long admired it from afar, that people who give their time to help, to give medical help to people who can't afford insurance but are working. And so there's so many good things that are going on, but unfortunately there's still silencing and know your place, and women know your place. But I do believe that that is changing. Did anyone want to have a comment about having Jesus be a married man? One of the things I want to say before, I'd love to hear your comments, is that when Sue told me about this book that she was going to write, she said, and I always remember this, at that time, it would have been very unusual for a Jewish man not to be married. Jesus was 30 years old when he started his ministry. So at that time, it would have been very unusual for a Jewish man not to be married. But does anyone have any comments about that? Or what were your feelings about it? Did it bother you? Did it not bother you? Was it a vehicle for Anna to tell her story?
I liked it. I was happy to read the book. I only joined this book club. This is my second time, and I thought, well, if I'm going to read the book. So I picked up because I thought, well, if Maureen likes that, well. I started reading it, and like you said, it was hard to put down. I just kept wanting to go back and read more. And I kind of liked hearing about Anna because my life is like, man, I'm so old that having grown up years ago, I kept hearing so much from everyone. It's the boys that matter. The boys need to go to college. The women are like second class. Well, it turned out that I have John, my brothers, and had a business of my own. So Anna, to me, was wonderful.
An inspiration.
Yes, I really enjoyed it.
Anna was an inspiration. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we want to hear.
I guess I'm going on another side. Sitting women, willing to do things at this time. I was thinking in terms of Jesus as a married man, and that kind of troubled me. He is human and divine, and that is a mystery, and that is something I still have to work to get my head around. I don't think I'll ever make sense of it because it's a mystery. But on the other hand, I expected if Jesus were going to marry, that he would devote himself to a marriage. You know, is my understanding that marriage, when you enter into marriage, you enter into a situation where you're going to make the best of everything. You can't just go off and say, oh, excuse me, I have a calling. I have to go out now and be a preacher. And so I kind of rejected that idea that he's married, they have the baby, it was the baby, and there's no more kids. It's that part of it that's kind of got into my head. As far as, the feminist angle, well done. And I thought the crucifixion, the picture of the crucifixion was very moving. But the kind of book broke down for me in that instance.
Thank you. I think Anna knew that Jesus had his calling. And because she had that strong feeling of a calling, they could make that work in this book. And this is historical fiction. But it is something that we certainly never learned in catechism, that that Jesus was married first. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the book. And unfortunately, Sue doesn't write books very often. So I asked if she had anything coming up. And she said she has some ideas. She's doing some storyboards, but can't tell us what it's about. So we just have to anticipate until her book has a name. We won't know anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Maureen. That was fabulous. Another wonderful book discussion today, girls. So next month, Kathy Rushok is going to present Lizette's List by Susan Veerland. It will be on January 8th. And I hope to see you all there. Here, I should say. Thank you again, girls. And thanks, Maureen. It was fabulous. Lots and lots and lots of work involved in that. You could tell Maureen spent a lot of time. Thank you. Quiet crowd today. A quiet crowd today.